Vivid verses.
She said it with a smile. You always were better at the presentation than the substance. I think that's what everyone here finds so charming about you. I had been with Renee for 4 years. We'd moved in together after 14 months, which felt right at the time. We'd talked through the timeline, agreed on the neighborhood, split the deposit evenly. I had paid the movers because she was between accounts, and I told her not to worry about it. That was 3 years ago. I had not worried about it since, and neither had she. The dinner was at Hardrove's, a restaurant attached to the firm's preferred hotel for out-of-town clients. 12 people at a long table. My managing partner, Glenn, 2 senior associates, 3 clients we were actively courting, and their respective guests. I had mentioned the dinner to Renee twice in the preceding week and once that afternoon. I had told her specifically that the Callaway account was at a decision point. She wore the green dress and looked beautiful. She ordered the halibut and the second most expensive bottle on the list without consulting me. I noticed, but did not mark it. The conversation moved the way these dinners do, some business, some theater, the careful performance of being the kind of people whose company is worth paying for. I was doing well. Glenn was relaxed. The Callaway clients were laughing at the right moments. Then Renee set her wine glass down in a particular way. Not a slam, just a placement with purpose, the way you put a period at the end of a sentence. And she said it. You always were better at the presentation than the substance. I think that's what everyone here finds so charming about you. She said it with the cadence of a compliment. She said it while touching my arm. She was smiling when she said it, and she kept smiling after, and she looked at the table like she was inviting them to agree. The table did the thing a table does when something lands wrong. A half-second of suspension, the kind where people find their glasses very interesting. Glenn's jaw moved slightly. One of the Callaway clients, a man named Brett who had been laughing easily all evening, went still. I smiled. Not the smile that costs something. The smile that costs nothing, because I've already made my decision. She thinks this is a small thing. She has always thought these were small things. That is the most important data point of the evening, and I already have everything I need from it. She's being generous, I said, and I looked at Brett and redirected to the point he'd been making about their Q3 timeline, and the table breathed again, and the dinner continued, and I was present for every remaining minute of it in the way that matters. Attentive, warm, professionally exact. Renee touched my arm twice more before we left. In the car, I let the silence sit for exactly the length of time it needed to. No radio. Headlights pulling the road toward us. That's the last time you're going anywhere with me, I said. Get your things and find somewhere else to live. We're done. Calm. Final. She turned to look at me. I kept my eyes on the road. I didn't sleep poorly. That surprised some people later when the shape of events became visible to them. They expected the image of a man awake at 3 a.m., jaw tight, replaying. That wasn't what happened. What happened was, I lay in the dark and I reconstructed. Not what I felt. What I knew. The dinner at Hardrove's was not an isolated event. I understood that in the car, and I understood it more precisely in the dark. Better at the presentation than the substance. I turned the phrase over like an object, examining it from different angles, looking for the seams. There were none. It was constructed. It was the kind of sentence you arrive at in advance. I began with the record. 14 months before we moved in together, she had quit her position at a design firm after a conflict with her director. I had covered her half of our shared expenses, dinners, weekends, the trip to the coast, for 6 weeks while she looked for freelance work. I had never mentioned it. I had logged it privately, not as debt, but as data, as information about the shape of things. When we moved in, the deposit had been $1,100 per person. She'd asked me to advance her share, and she'd pay me back by March. It was now 3 years and 4 months later. The apartment's internet and utilities ran to about $290 a month. I paid them because she said she'd handle the groceries. Her handling of the groceries averaged, by my count, 9 transactions in the first year, declining to roughly 4 in the most recent 12 months. My card handled the rest. There was a charity gala for a foundation she cared about, October 2 years ago. She'd wanted to attend. Table seats were $400 each. I bought 2 without discussion. During the dinner, she introduced me to her colleagues as my partner who works in finance, which is approximately as accurate as calling a surgeon someone who works with knives. I noted it, said nothing. My firm's client appreciation weekend in the spring, 18 months ago, I had asked her not to bring up the project we'd had a disagreement about because 2 of the clients were connected to the same sector. She raised it within 40 minutes of arrival. I spent the next hour managing the conversation back to safe ground. She did not notice I'd done this. Glenn's retirement party. She told a story at dinner about a deal I'd nearly lost, framed as charming self-deprecation on my behalf, without asking permission to tell it, without knowing all of its details, in front of 3 people whose regard was professionally relevant to me. I had spent 2 days repairing the impression. She did not know there had been 2 days to repair. A birthday dinner for my colleague Fiona. Renee had disagreed publicly with something Fiona said about her own industry, escalated it past the point of debate into something closer to dismissal, and then gone quiet in a way that made the table uncomfortable. I had steered the rest of the meal. Fiona had been gracious. I had texted Fiona the next morning to acknowledge what had happened. Renee had texted Fiona that afternoon as though the evening had been lovely. 6 incidents, and those are only the ones with witnesses. The pattern assembled itself without requiring emotion. She did not embarrass me accidentally. She did it on schedule, in proportion to the professional stakes of the room, and then she re-engaged warmth immediately after, in the car, or the elevator, or across the table, as though the air had cleared itself, as though I had cleared it by smiling and redirecting, and that labor was simply part of the landscape, better at the presentation than the substance. The line was about me, but it was also, in the most precise possible reading, a description of what she had been doing to me for 4 years. Showing up, performing warmth, and offering nothing that would require her to cost herself anything. I formed the plan on a Tuesday. I told no one. I did not need to. The clarity is complete. I know exactly what I'm doing and exactly why, and those 2 things will never require anyone else's agreement to be true. She did not find somewhere else to live immediately. That was expected. The first thing I did was change nothing visible. I continued to be civil. I made coffee in the morning and left a cup for her because I had always done this, and stopping abruptly would have created a scene I did not want. I said good morning when she came into the kitchen. I answered direct questions directly. I volunteered nothing. She asked on the 3rd morning, "Are you still serious about what you said?" She's hoping the interval has done the work, that I've moved from the decision back toward the discussion. "Yes," I said. I pour my coffee. "Have you looked at the Fairview sublets? There are a few good ones in your range." She stared at me. "You're looking at listings? I sent you 3 this morning." She didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, "So you're just fine? You're just completely fine?" That's not a question. It's an accusation dressed as a question. She wants me to defend my emotional state so she can attack it. "I'm going to be late," I said. I picked up my bag and left. The second thing I did was contact my building's management office. Our lease was in my name. It had always been in my name because she'd been between addresses when we moved in and the timing hadn't worked out. I requested documentation of the primary tenant's right to reassign occupancy in the case of relationship dissolution. They sent it within the day. When Renee found the email open on my laptop that evening, she read it standing in the kitchen doorway. "You requested documentation." "Yes." to remove me from the apartment, to understand the process. Marcus, she caught herself on the name she'd been using, my colleague's name, the name she sometimes called people when she was flustered. She meant to say my name. She said, "I can't believe you're doing this in writing." She means she can't believe there's a record. That's what's actually concerning her. "Everything I do is in writing," I said. "I've always been careful that way." She set her bag down on the counter and looked at me with something I recognized. Not hurt, not anger, but recalibration. She was measuring the new terrain. "We should talk about this." "We can talk whenever you'd like," I said. "The sublets I sent you are available for first of the month." The third thing I did was speak to Glenn. Not about Renee. I never mentioned Renee to Glenn. I went to him with the Callaway account deliverables I'd been preparing, and I laid out what we'd accomplished since the dinner. Follow-up calls, a preliminary proposal, a timeline that put us ahead of where he'd expected to be. I put the work on the table and let it answer the evening at Hardrose without either of us naming the evening at Hardrose. Glenn looked at the numbers for a moment and then looked at me. "This is solid," he said. "Really solid, actually." Callaway's Q3 concern was about execution speed. I said, "These show we've anticipated it." He's filing something away. He came into this meeting with a slight wariness, residue from the dinner. He's leaving it without that wariness. That's all I needed. Glenn nodded. "Good. Let's move forward." The fourth thing was the money. Renee's name was not on the utilities, not on the internet, not on any of the recurring accounts I maintained for the apartment. The only account we'd shared in any formal sense was a grocery tab I'd added her to, briefly, for a period of about 8 months in year 2. I removed her from it, quietly, administratively, the way you adjust a standing order. She noticed 5 days later when a purchase was declined. "The grocery tab," she said. That evening, at the kitchen island, her voice careful. "I updated the account," I said. "You took me off it." "Yes." She put both hands flat on the counter. "You're doing this one piece at a time." She's right. She's not supposed to notice that out loud. "I'm clarifying what belongs to what arrangement," I said. "The arrangement has changed. You haven't even given me time to process." "I said in the car," I said. 3 weeks ago. I let that sit. That was the time. She didn't have an answer for that. I watched her look for one and not find it, and I waited, and then I said, "Good night," and I walked to the other room. The fifth thing was Fiona. I ran into her at the break room on a Thursday, genuinely ran into her. This wasn't arranged. She'd heard through the ambient intelligence of any workplace that something had shifted in my personal life, which meant she'd heard it from someone who'd heard something approximate and processed it into rumor. She poured her coffee and looked at me. "I heard things at home are unsettled. She's being careful. She likes me. She's also waiting to see what version of this I'm carrying." "Transitional," I said, "not unsettled." She nodded slowly. "For what it's worth," she said, and then she stopped. She set her mug down, the same deliberate placement I'd clocked months ago, different meaning this time. "For what it's worth, the birthday dinner. What happened?" "I knew you knew. You handled it graciously," I said. "I shouldn't have had to handle it at all." There it is. Not an alliance. A witness confirming their own account. I nodded once. Said nothing more. We left the break room separately. The sixth thing was the deposit. I sent her a message, not a conversation, a documented message on the communication thread we use for apartment logistics, noting that per the lease terms, my deposit could be allocated to reletting costs in the event of a sole tenant transition. I attached the management company's documentation. I noted that her original deposit contribution had been advanced by me in month 1 and had not been repaid, and that I was not claiming it, only noting it for completeness. She read it at 7 in the evening. I saw the read receipt. She didn't respond until after midnight, and when she did, the message said, "Can we please just talk like adults?" I replied in the morning, "I'm available this evening at 7 if you want to sit down." She didn't show for the 7 o'clock. That's the sixth thing. She had the chance to engage with facts and chose not to. That's also a data point. The seventh thing was the dinner. I had dinner with a colleague of mine, Terrence, at a small Italian place we both liked. Renee didn't know Terrence well, but she knew of him. He was the kind of person whose name came up in conversations about the firm. She wasn't invited. I mention this only because she drove past the restaurant. I don't know if it was intentional. I saw her car from the window, slowing at the corner. I returned to my conversation with Terrence without marking it. She did not come in. Better at the presentation than the substance. In 3.5 weeks, I had not once needed to perform anything I was not genuinely doing. I had not performed composure. I had not performed certainty. I was composed because I was certain, and the difference was visible to everyone except, perhaps, her. The eighth thing she did for me. She came to my office. Not a planned visit. She came to the building, went to the front desk, and asked for me. The receptionist, understandably, called up. I came down. She was standing in the lobby in the green dress, the same dress which I noticed and said nothing about, and she said, loudly enough for the front desk to hear, "I don't understand why you get to just end something without any conversation. You don't even have the decency to fight." She wants me to fight. She's made a spectacle to force me to engage at a register. The lobby is her choice of venue because she thinks it changes my calculus. I looked at her. I said, "I'll walk you out." At the door, outside, I turned to her. I said, "The conversation happened in the car. I've been available every day since. You didn't come at 7. That's not what I mean, and you know it." "What you mean," I said, quietly because we were outside and I had no need for volume, "is that you want a version of this where I get loud enough for you to manage. I'm not going to do that." I held the door. "Go home, Renee. Start packing." She looked at me for a long moment with something that was not quite anger and not quite grief and was, I think, recognition. She's seeing it. Not understanding it yet, but seeing it. She left. I went back to my desk. Terrence called me on a Sunday. He opened with small talk, the way people do when they've been asked to call and aren't sure how to begin. I let him run it out. "I had drinks with Renee Friday," he said, finally. "Okay. She's pretty torn up, man. She said you went from 0 to ending the relationship without any warning. Without any warning. For years. 6 incidents. 3 weeks of available evenings. Did she tell you what happened at the Hargroves dinner?" I asked. Silence. "She mentioned the dinner," he said carefully. "What did she tell you about it?" A longer silence this time. "She said it got tense, and you took it the wrong way. Better at the presentation than the substance." I let the phrase sit in my head for a moment, examining it again. "Terrence," I said, "did she tell you what she said? Specifically, the sentence." He was quiet. "Not the exact words, no. She said in front of Glenn, in front of the Callaway clients, that I was better at the presentation than the substance." I paused. Think about what that sentence is in that room to those people. The silence was different now. He made a sound that wasn't quite a word. "Did she tell you it wasn't the first time?" I asked. "Nothing." "Thank you for calling, Terrence," I said. "I appreciate you." I ended the call. His colleague Nadia reached me Tuesday. She was Renee's friend first, which was relevant. She skipped the small talk. "Renee says you blindsided her." "Blindsided?" "Nadia," I said, "did she tell you about Fiona's birthday dinner?" A pause. "She mentioned it. She said it got a little awkward." "She publicly dismissed Fiona's expertise in front of her own colleagues," I said. I spent the next 48 hours in repair. Renee texted Fiona the following afternoon as though the evening had been fine. I let that land. "Did she tell you that?" Quiet. "Did she tell you about the Callaway dinner?" I asked. She said, specifically, the sentence. I heard Nadia exhale. "No, she didn't give me the sentence." "Thank you," I said. "Take care of yourself." My friend Carl, called Wednesday, which surprised me more than the others because Carl was careful and had no reason to take sides. He said he'd had coffee with Renee and that she seemed genuinely devastated. I believe that, I said. She thinks you made a decision in the car and then spent 3 weeks executing it instead of talking. Did she tell you what the decision was based on? She said the dinner. She said, what about the dinner? He paused. She said there was a comment that landed wrong. A comment that landed wrong. As though the sentence had drifted off course on its own, without a speaker. Carl, I said, did she tell you the comment was about my intelligence at a professional dinner in front of my managing partner and clients I was actively trying to close? He was quiet for a moment. Then, she didn't put it that way. I know, I said. Thank you for calling. My colleague Ray left a voicemail. He had apparently run into Renee at a coffee shop near the firm, and she'd flagged him down. His voicemail said he didn't want to get in the middle, but he thought I should know she was really struggling. I texted back, thanks for letting me know, Ray. Did she say anything about what happened at the Hargroves dinner? His response came 90 minutes later. She mentioned a misunderstanding. Did she mention specifically what she said? A pause. Then no. What did she say? I texted him the sentence. Another pause. Longer. Then, oh. Thank you, Ray. My firm's office manager, a woman named Harriet who had known me for 6 years and was no one's neutral party, sent me a message on Thursday asking if I had time for coffee. This was unusual enough that I agreed immediately. We sat at the small cafe attached to the building's lobby, 2 chairs by the window, paper cups, 12 minutes before her next meeting. I'm not going to pretend I don't know what's happening, she said. She was direct. It was one of her best qualities. A woman called the main line yesterday, asking to leave a message for you. Renee. She didn't leave her name, but she wanted me to tell you that you were overreacting. She's filing a message through an office main line. She's running out of direct channels. I looked at my cup. Harriet, I said, what do you know about the Hargroves dinner? She tilted her head. I know Glenn came back from it in a particular mood. Did he say anything? Not to me. She paused. But I've worked here long enough to read a particular kind of quiet. She set her cup down. I've also worked here long enough to know what your record looks like. The Callaway follow-up was very well done. She's not defending Renee. She's checking on me. I'm fine, I said. I know you are, she said. That's actually what I wanted to confirm. She stood. I've never seen you like this, if I'm being honest. There it is. I looked up at her. I'm not different, I said. I'm just clear. She nodded, considered that, and left. The call I hadn't expected came Saturday evening. From Renee's closest friend, a woman named B who had been at our apartment more evenings than I could count, who had known Renee since before I was part of the picture, who had never, in 4 years, given me any indication that she saw what I saw. She called. I answered. I've been thinking about this for 2 weeks, she said before I could say anything. I've been going back through things. A pause. I owe you an apology. Don't let that show. Register it. File it. Let her finish. I've been a bad friend to you by being a good friend to her, she said. I knew what she did at Glenn's retirement dinner. I was there. I watched you handle it. I told myself you were fine because you seemed fine. She exhaled. That wasn't fair to you. B, I said, you don't owe me anything. I'm telling you anyway. Another pause. I talked to her yesterday. I told her the same thing. A silence. She didn't like that very much. Renee's closest person is no longer holding the version of reality Renee constructed. The architecture is visible now. I appreciate you, I said. Take care of yourself. I sat with the phone for a moment after I hung up. I won't let that show. But I noted it. I noted exactly what it means. She called that night. Renee, not B. Late enough that it was deliberate. Everyone I talked to, she said. Her voice had moved past its earlier registers into something rawer, something that had the shape of genuine distress and also the shape of a final strategy. Everyone I talk to ends up asking me about that sentence. How is everyone asking about that sentence? Because you didn't tell them the sentence. Because the sentence is the fact that changes everything, and you knew that before you said it, and you said it anyway. Because it's the relevant fact, I said. It was a comment. It was one comment. It was the sixth one, I said, in rooms that mattered. To people who were deciding what to think about me. You counted them. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. I didn't know you were counting. Better at the presentation than the substance. I wasn't announcing a score, I said. I was watching a pattern. And you just decided. In the car, I said. Yes. Without giving me a chance. I gave you 4 years, I said. Gently. The way you say the true thing that has no useful softening. Good night, Renee. I ended the call. The change, when it came fast. I know people found the speed remarkable. Terrence mentioned it indirectly in a message he sent asking if I wanted to grab lunch. His way of normalizing contact, of gesturing at the shape things were settling into. He said, I don't know what you said to her, but she seems different. I hadn't said anything to her. That was the point. She asked to meet. I agreed to 30 minutes at a coffee place equidistant from both of us, a small room with 6 tables, which meant we would have minimal audience and maximum accountability. She arrived before me, which I noted. She had a folder. The first thing she put on the table was a check. The deposit, she said, plus 2 years of groceries, average from what I could reconstruct. She named the amount. It was higher than I had ever calculated or mentioned. I went back through my own records, she said. I went back through the whole thing. She did her own audit. She arrived at her own number. The second thing was a printed email, the confirmation of a new lease for an apartment on the opposite side of the city. Signed. Dated 4 days ago. Move in at the end of the month. Third, her key to the building was already on the table when she sat down. She pushed it toward me. Fourth, she had called Glenn's assistant and requested a brief meeting. She had apologized to Glenn directly. She told me this looking at the table, not at me, for creating a poor impression at the Hargroves dinner. Glenn, she said, had been gracious. Fifth, she had called Fiona. The call had lasted 20 minutes. She slid her phone across so I could see Fiona's response in their thread. Thank you. I really mean that. I looked at the folder, the check, the key, the lease confirmation, the phone screen. She did the work. Every single piece of it before she sat down. The speed of this, she said, and her voice had something in it that wasn't performance, is because I didn't want to give myself time to talk myself out of any of it. Talia mentioned to me that you'd made some changes quickly, I said. She was surprised. What did you tell her? That the timeline is less interesting than whether it's real. She nodded. A long moment passed. I kept saying you were overreacting, she said. Every person I talked to, I was building the case that you were overreacting. She looked at her hands, and then asked me to say the sentence out loud. Not to describe it, to say it exactly. She paused. I hadn't done that since I said it. What happened when you said it? I understood, she said, what I'd actually done. I looked at her. She looked back. She had earned this honesty, and I wasn't going to dilute it with false warmth. I was always going to say something like it, she said, finally. It came out quiet, like a thing she'd been carrying. Not to hurt you. Because I think, she stopped. Started again. Because I think I needed you to be a little smaller, and I kept finding moments to make that happen, and I told myself every single time that you could handle it. She looked up. That's not a reason. I know that. No, I said. It's not. I was better at the presentation than the substance. She said it carefully, deliberately, returning it to its origin. That was me. I was describing me. I held that. She had arrived at the thing herself, without my help, and that mattered more than if I'd pointed to it. Take care of yourself, I said. I stood. I left the check on the table. She'd earned the gesture of returning it, and I'd decide what to do with it later on my own time. She stayed seated when I left. I didn't look back. Here is what I know. What you allow to be said about you in rooms that matter is a form of speech. Every time I smiled and redirected, I was saying something about what I would absorb, about what the baseline was, about what was survivable. Silence in the right mouth becomes permission. What I should have understood sooner is that composure and accommodation are not the same thing. I had been composed while accommodating things that had no business being accommodated, and I had told myself that was patience. It was not patience. It was a slow agreement with someone's low estimate of me. The moment I stopped agreeing, in the car quietly, finally, nothing needed to be performed anymore. I was not different. I was just clear. And clarity, it turns out, requires absolutely no one else's participation to be true.
Thanks for listening.